For much of the last decade, the left participated in activism and protests condemning the Bush administration's wars of aggression and calling for the president's impeachment. Now that it is a Democrat in the White House, however, these selfsame activists are suddenly shying away from impeachment as a way to stop the American war machine. This is the GRTV Backgrounder on grtv.ca. Whatever one thinks of the George W. Bush administration and its historical legacy, there is one fact that is beyond dispute. The war in Iraq galvanized the left in a manner that had not been seen in the streets of America since the end of the Vietnam War. Leading up to the Democrats' regaining of the House in the 2006 midterm elections, the calls for Bush's, and perhaps even more importantly, Cheney's impeachment, were echoed across the left-wing blogosphere and spilled out onto the streets. This crusade was led by organizations like Veterans for Peace, Code Pink, and The World Can't Wait, who used a combination of rallies, resolutions, and headline-grabbing photo ops to make the point, sometimes quite literally, that the Bush administration had blood on its hands and must be removed from office.
Today, we gathered to discuss and vote upon the impeachment of George W. Bush and Richard B. Cheney.
If we refuse to be silenced and frightened by the high-class thugs across Pennsylvania Avenue, if we stop being stereotypically good soldiers and good Americans, if we do what history demands in this critical hour, we can get our troops home now. We can put an end to the suffering and to the war crimes. We can begin to absolve our complicity, and we can give George Bush an accountability moment he will never forget.
One would have thought, given this fervent anti-war sentiment, that these same groups would be overjoyed that Republican congressmen would be willing to reach across the aisle and submit a resolution to impeach the commander-in-chief should he wage another unconstitutional war by committing American forces to the destruction of Syria without so much as authorization from Congress. In fact, just such a move did take place last year, but rather than applaud it, the very same supposedly anti-war left that was so active against Bush has done its level best to ignore the very existence of this resolution and silence its advocates. The resolution, known as House Concurrent Resolution 107 or HCR 107, was submitted to the House Judiciary Committee last March by North Carolina Republican Congressman Walter Jones, the same congressman who sued President Obama for violating the War Powers Act by committing American forces to Libya without congressional approval. HCR 107 states, "It is the sense of Congress that, except in response to an actual or imminent attack against the territory of the United States, the use of offensive military force by a president without prior and clear authorization of an act of Congress violates Congress's exclusive power to declare war under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution, and therefore constitutes an impeachable high crime and misdemeanor under Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution." Last year I had the chance to talk to Congressman Walter Jones about the resolution, its origins, and its importance.
Well, James, I want to thank you, and let me explain the history of why I thought this legislation was important. First, in 1999, I was one of 20 members of Congress. That group was led by Congressman Tom Campbell from California. He now is the Dean of the School of Law at Stanford University. And we went to the federal courts because President Clinton had bypassed Congress to bomb Kosovo. And Tom led the group of 20, and we went to the federal courts and said that the president had bypassed Congress, had bypassed the Constitution. And so therefore the courts, after a few weeks, said they would not move forward with that lawsuit because Congress had the authority through the budgeting process to stop funding wars. Well, then in 2 years ago, when President Obama decided that he would bomb Libya, and Dennis Kucinich from Ohio, myself, and also Ron Paul on the Republican side and Tim Johnson on the Republican side, joined Dennis Kucinich and 2 Democrats, and we went to the federal courts with Jonathan Turley. As you know, Jonathan Turley is a law professor at George Washington University, constitutional law, and he joined us, and we thought we had a pretty good position, and we went to the federal courts, and they again came back with the same decision that happened in 1999. That is, you, the Congress, you have the power of the purse. And James, the problem is when our troops are overseas fighting and dying, it's hard to cut the funding of their equipment and necessary, ammunition, whatever it might be. So I decided, and concerned about the talk of going into Syria, and some talk about Iran, and I just decided that Congress for too long has bypassed its constitutional responsibility to debate and declare war, which the Constitution says we shall do that. So my reason in putting this concurrent resolution in 107 that you just mentioned is for the simple reason I want to see Congress, if I can use an analogy of sports, to get out of the stands and get back on the field and defend the Constitution.
Such a resolution, if it had been introduced just a few years ago, would have seemed like manna from heaven for the left. Coming from a Republican, no less, it would have been the focal point for political action in the American anti-war movement. Coming as it did in 2012, however, few have even heard of this resolution. You see, a funny thing happened 4 years ago. The letter following the president's name switched from an R to a D, and just like that, the energies and activism of the self-styled anti-war left evaporated overnight. Under a Democrat, America could expand the so-called war on terror into Pakistan with impunity, because, after all, Obama is a Democrat and doing what he must to protect America from the threat of terror. Under a Democrat, America could develop its drone strike program into a concerted warfare strategy, expanding it into Yemen, Somalia, and doubtless other countries not yet disclosed, and the anti-war advocates would fail to denounce it because, after all, he's the president and privy to information that we don't have about emerging threats and hotspots. Under a Democrat, the left is only too happy to look the other way while the president signs into law bills to detain Americans indefinitely without so much as a trial, or develops a presidential kill list that supposedly gives the commander-in-chief the authority to kill anyone, anywhere in the world, at any time, including American citizens, without even having to explain that decision, a power that he has in fact already invoked. To be fair, no one is more baffled or frustrated by this turn of events than those members of the anti-war left who are genuinely anti-war. The ones who don't care what party the president is associated with or what color his skin is. To these anti-war protesters, the ones who were inspired by the depravity of the Bush-era atrocities to join these activist organizations years ago, Obama is every bit as much a war criminal as Bush was, and every bit as deserving of impeachment. This was expressed most visibly by the membership of Veterans for Peace, a nonprofit organization of American veterans dedicated to abolishing war as an instrument of national policy. Last September at their national convention in Portland, the VFP membership passed a resolution by majority vote calling for the organization to officially call for the impeachment of Obama for war crimes. The resolution was closely modeled on a previous VFP call for the impeachment of Bush, outlining the case against Obama, from his unconstitutional, unauthorized war in Libya to the ongoing war crimes in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia, concluding, "Therefore be it resolved that Veterans for Peace call on the U.S. House of Representatives to immediately begin impeachment proceedings against President Barack H. Obama for failure to uphold his sworn oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and for his commission of war crimes, crimes against humanity, obstruction of justice, and the violation of numerous national and international laws, treaties, and conventions." Amazingly, however, even after having been passed by a majority of its membership, the leadership of Veterans for Peace has, according to its own rank and file, done its level best to conceal the resolution and downplay the call for impeachment. In an article that has been widely circulated online, Phil Restino, the resolution's chief proponent and a member of the Central Florida chapter of VFP, outlines how, exactly contrary to the Bush impeachment resolution, the leadership has failed to promote the Obama resolution, or even make copies of it available to the public, and had to be pestered for over a year to make available a copy of the letter to Congress that they were required to send as a result of the resolution. Last week, Phil Restino joined me on the Corbett Report to talk about Veterans for Peace and the leadership's total unwillingness to pursue the impeachment of Obama.
Well, this Code Pink, World Can't Wait, all these groups, it's a community, James. And there has been a concerted, there's been a mass silence on this whole thing about impeachment of the Democrat. I really believe if the left called for impeachment of the Democrat for the same crimes that they cited in the call for impeachment of the Republican, there's nowhere to pass the political football. You take the partisanship out of it, and once again, the people have a chance to reclaim the power of the people's remedy, which is impeachment. And there must be a heck of a lot invested in keeping this left versus right thing going. And Paul Craig Roberts recently wrote a piece where agenda prevails over truth, and that seems to be the case here. The so-called anti-war movement, to get back to your question, now, ever since Obama got in, is really a joke, in my opinion. Code Pink, in particular, Stop the Next War. You mentioned HCON Resolution 107. That's what Walter Jones had introduced in 2012. He was very bothered by how Obama just on his own ordered a bombing of Libya, and how he didn't even bother to go to Congress and even bother to lie about it. He just called it in. I believe he was in South America at the time, and just called it in, and our military started sending, 100, 150 cruise missiles bombing Libya, and that should have been a call for impeachment right there. That's an act of war, for crying out loud, and the anti-war movement just let it slide, and Congress let it slide, and it's like taking off your shoes at the airport. We didn't say no when they told us to take off our shoes at the airport, and now look how ridiculous it is. You know, TSA outnumbers the number of people on the airplane, for crying out loud, and they're molesting children in front of their parents. It's because we didn't say no, and so I fault the anti-war movement for all the death and destruction that's happened since that third day in office when Obama bombed Pakistan. That's when we should have called for his impeachment, and we should still call for his impeachment.
The saddest part of all of this, of course, is that the prospect of impeachment and the chance for repudiation of the bloodthirsty American government is even further from the realm of political reality than it was under Bush. But another sad truth to fall out from this whole affair is that the left's harshest critics were completely correct after all. The anti-war movement was never about war. In the end, it turns out, the left now has the blood of Obama's wars on their own hands. The silver lining to this dark story, if there is one to be had, is that as a result of all of this, there will be more and more waking up to the complete charade of party politics and realizing that a true, honest, anti-war movement will have to be built from scratch, completely outside of the two-party duopoly. For more on this story and other breaking news and current events, please go to globalresearch.ca. For more research and analysis by James Corbett, please go to corbettreport.com.